My favourite topic.
Encrochat.
Yeah. He said many's a time, Eamon Dillon, that I banged on about Encrochat. Banged on, he said.
Yeah.
And now you're all sitting down watching the Channel 4 documentary. Go ahead first and we'll talk about the remarks made by Detective Chief Seamus Boland, what's his title?
So obviously the reason you've been banging on, or one might say over the years, has been because Encrochat, most people would know at this stage, but basically it was a hidden network used by criminals across the world, and it was hacked into by the French, and messages were shared across Europe, and it led to a huge number of prosecutions. Some of the biggest criminals across the continent have been put behind bars. However, Ireland was an outlier, and none of the Encrochat messages were used to bring criminal prosecutions. They were, the Gardaí said, solely used for intelligence purposes to see who was in contact with each other. But we had Ken Foy, who writes for the Irish Independent and for us in the Sunday World, had interviewed Detective Chief Superintendent Seamus Boland last week, and it was probably one of the first times that a very senior guard has spoken about Encrochat and the use of that information. And he said that the Gardaí have now been officially and legally given the relevant data from the hack on Irish criminals. And the reason you, of course, were banging on about it was that we do know that the copies of the text messages were sent to the Gardaí in general, but it is believed that that information was held by Crime and Security, which would be an intelligence division, and it wasn't sent out in the same way it had been in the UK. And he said then as well, Detective Superintendent Seamus Boland said, from an investigator's perspective, here in the DOCB, the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, we are pursuing a number of investigations at the moment where we would hope to use data that was recovered from the Encrochat takedown in a criminal prosecution. So that would be, while we've seen it in England, and we've obviously Channel 4 have a huge documentary series about it.
We've seen it in the bloody north. We've seen it up the road.
We've seen it up the north. We've seen it in across the continent.
Yeah.
But this, we've yet to see the Gardaí introduce Encrochat messages to a criminal prosecution.
He's quite clearly stating now that all that information has been disseminated down. He's working in the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau. They have it.
Yes.
And they are going to pursue criminal charges now with this. Now, let's just set the scene here in this country for a minute first before we start to talk about the Channel 4 documentary, which we've all seen a bit of. I've seen all of. But basically, at the moment in this country, there is one file with the Director of Public Prosecutions which contains encrypted messages and is a case based on encrypted messages. It has been with the Public Prosecutions Department for, I think, nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
And there's been no decision made on it. We had the big takedown of the family organised crime group because of the ghost hack, which was another separate encrypted system that they were using. And very high profile, very heavy PR-driven exercise. And senior members of the family group were arrested, released without charge, and files being prepared for the DPP. So we've got actually nowhere yet with it.
Well, and just, the reasons are obscure for the most part, why it has gone the certain way. But Detective Chief Superintendent Boland does address it. He says, we are pursuing a number of those investigations at the moment. We as investigators were not involved in it, and that's referring to Encrochat. He said, we are gathering the necessary evidential requirements in an effort to use the data because I think it will be extremely important. But the investigators in the DOCB were not involved in that investigation when it was live and ongoing. We are looking at that data, we are considering it and gathering it in the legal capacity. So that we hopefully use it in criminal prosecutions in Ireland. We would hope to have some very significant successes. And then he does go on to say it will not be easy and quite complex because of the different legal systems across Europe, but expressed confidence that the DOCB investigators who are compiling the investigations express confidence in them that they could bring it to court.
So now I can guarantee you that if they're talking about investigating these Encrochat material, top of their list will be a murder that happened outside this jurisdiction in Belfast in April of 2020, smack bang as that hack started, and it was the murder of Robbie Lawler. And, there's people before the courts in the north in relation to their roles to do with the murder. During some bail applications, some bail hearings, we've heard that there was up to 20 people involved in it, that it was a very large enterprise. We do know that, suspects on this side of the border include the notorious Mr. Big.
Yeah.
And he is understood to have directed operations in regards to this murder, working with other known criminals and associates in the north. It's all on the phones. It's all sitting there. And we also know that Mr. Big is a top target of the Drugs and Organised Crime Bureau, and they would be only too happy to have evidence to link him to any crime. However, can you be charged with murder in this jurisdiction if the murder happened in another jurisdiction?
So these are some of the complications, actually, we've already seen.
We're expecting that one, were you?
Well, this is,
Let's ask.
Well, you can actually...
I knew he'd know.
Yeah. We had that with Jerry Mackin when he was tried in Dublin for a murder in Belfast.
In fact, we spoke about it yesterday with Nicola, myself.
That's the other way around, my friends.
What?
No, but the legislation is there to allow for it.
Both ways.
Both ways. Yeah, it's
right.
And
that was a failed. It's sort of a.
It was, yeah. I mean, the case. It wasn't.
It collapsed because of prosecution.
But still, yeah, it just the trial. Ended and he wasn't convicted. But that's nothing to do with the fact that he couldn't not be put on trial.
Right.
And we also had some of this referred to in the extradition of Peadar Keating.
Yeah.
Because Peadar Keating, the bizarre bit of it all of this is not only do we know that some of the major criminals in Ireland were using Encrochat phones, we know their handles and everything.
Yeah.
And they include Peadar Keating, Liam Byrne, and others involved at very high level in that Kavanagh organised crime gang.
Yeah.
And Peadar Keating, that was some of the arguments made before he consented to extradition, that it couldn't be proven what country he was in when it was alleged he was planning this bit and that bit. So of course that'll be a legal complication.
Yeah, yeah.
But it shouldn't. If a conspiracy occurs, even if part of it occurs in the Republic, you think it would be a legal hurdle that could be surmounted.
Now you come back to talking about handles, and this really is at the heart of Encrochat. So the documentary that's on at the moment, which I watched binged actually one night with sticks in my eyes to hold them open so as I could see the end of it. I think you guys have certainly begun to watch this documentary. It's a Channel 4, I think it's a 5-parter. It's called Encrochat, Operation Dark Phone, Murder by Text. It is a fascinating behind the scenes look at how the National Crime Agency in the UK were dealing with the information they were getting in live time. So the server was discovered in France by French police. It's all a little bit sort of still secretive. We don't have a proper clear story about how all that happened. But they discovered the server. The Dutch helped them hack it. And they somehow managed to, they put something on the phones, wasn't that it? They sent an update.
They sent an update, and it was basically a booby trap,
Yes.
And there was thousands and thousands of people just immediately updated because they were obviously security conscious, and they felt, you better keep my phone updated. And then they were able to see everything live. And so you saw it was brilliantly done in kind of the dramatized version of the documentary, where they're looking at this and they're looking at people trying to organize acid attacks and murders, and they're desperately trying to figure out who these people are. And gradually they it was 74 days while this was going on live, and they were gradually able to ID people, like some of them quite helpfully.
Yes.
In the case of Jamie, what's his name? Jamie Rothwell, who in Manchester, a serious gangster in Manchester, who took a selfie of himself, at a time when they were getting really worried. And then they were able to...
He was the guy that was in Dubai, was it?
No, he was in Barcelona, and then took a picture at the window of his apartment, and they were able to basically use Google Earth to figure out what building he was in. Yeah. And then the Spanish police, like the Irish police, weren't part of this operation. They didn't know where this information was coming from, and they put surveillance on the building, and the the British police couldn't tell them how they knew where he was or how they had this information.
Yeah.
It's actually fascinating as well, which is the first time I'd ever heard it, that they actually intercepted the messages before they were encrypted. So the person types it out and that was instantly intercepted, and then it gets encrypted and sent on. It was great.
So the handles, of course, are the names that you're given. So basically this system, Encrochat, was sold into the criminal underworld. It wasn't the first of these encrypted phone networks. There was previous ones actually that had also been shut down. Most of the earlier ones seem to have come out of the Netherlands. So basically, they developed these phones which were totally secure, supposedly bulletproof communication systems. They sold the phone and there's no SIM in them, or there is a SIM in them?
They're a normal phone. And they have a normal SIM, I suppose, but they have an app. It's the encryption goes through the app.
The app.
And they have a kind of they have a way to go into it.
And the servers were secret.
It's like a partition within the phone that you turn on in a certain way and you open up the secretive side. Otherwise, if someone just picks it up, it looks like a normal phone. Like we actually got a bit of an insight there with the Sam O'Sullivan stuff recently in the Criminal Access Bureau, and the guy working from Robert Noctor, when he was caught Noctor was caught in January of that year, like before.
Of 2020.
Yeah. And it was literally about 2 or 3 months before it started.
Right.
The live kind of messaging. And he had 93 grand. They needed I think it was 8 phones or something like that. He was actually known as Left Bay, and they knew that he was working for Shamrock, which now they had identified as Sam O'Sullivan. And the things as well, then we also know from when they raided Sam O'Sullivan's properties as well, which would have been in June of the same year.
Yeah.
Which is when the information was already out there that they found the various phones they were Android, so they weren't Apple iPhones, but they were given stickers to put on them, to make it look like that they had an Apple phone. They were trying to disguise the fact that this was an Encrochat device, because it was obviously. So
they basically, and just to explain to anybody watching or listening who Sam O'Sullivan is, just because we've sort of bumped him in here. So, Sam O'Sullivan will forever be known as the posh boy Kinahan, isn't that right? It's going to stick to him whether he likes it or not. He's a long-term associate of Christy Kinahan Sr.
Yeah, he's convictions for drug dealing in Spain and Holland, nothing in Ireland, and he's been the target of, I suppose, a cab operation in Ireland as well.
And is suspected of being pretty influential, really, in the Kinahan organisation, has been with them since the birth, I suppose, of that cartel in Spain. Was particularly close to Christy Kinahan Sr. Many would say, actually, he sort of viewed him as a son, and there was quite a bit of rivalry between him and Daniel Kinahan. He's been under the radar for many years, and I think those who knew him when he was younger are still blown away by the fact that he is who he is.
Yes, and that
people just don't, just can't understand it. But nonetheless, he has lived in various places, and in Geneva, he came back into the realms of Encrochat. Maybe it was last year, was it? I was contacted by a French journalist who was working on a sort of podcast in relation to this, and had discovered that Sam O'Sullivan was one of the Encrochat phone dealers. So he was selling the phone network into France.
The primary dealer, I think it was said, the number one.
Yeah, and had a property, or was listed as living in some very fancy property in the Alps.
Yeah.
But all the while, back in Ireland, Robert Noctor and he are discovered during raids with the Criminal Access Bureau. These phones are discovered. So they're clearly they're selling here, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, that's a separate business, because the Encrochat phones, obviously we heard that some of the costs involved, but there's huge amounts of money, and there was a huge amount of phones sold. So it became a business in of itself.
Who owned Encrochat, and why was the likes of Sam O'Sullivan a salesman? I mean, he don't need to do that.
Well, if you have an Encrochat phone, you need to be able to communicate with another person with an Encrochat phone. I don't know what the final figure for Encrochat was and how much of it was around organised crime, but certainly the vast majority of it. I mean, very few people had Encrochat phones who weren't involved in organised crime.
I think they think there was about 60,000 subscribers
And
at one point, and like more than half were caught by this the trapdoor booby trap that was implanted on the phones with this update.
So they had to.
And I totally get that. I totally get that.
Yeah.
That if you and I and Eamon needed to contact each other on these phones, we all needed the same device. And I totally get why Sam O'Sullivan would have them here in Ireland, probably to hand them out to members of the Kinahan organisation so as they could communicate with one another. What's he doing in France as the chief salesman of Encrochat devices?
On making profit. I mean, I think it's as simple as that.
He doesn't need to sell phones.
But it was £1,000 for a phone, and then it was £1,500 for a top up every 6 months. So if you have 1,000 customers, you're making a lot of money, and it's potentially legitimate. You're arguably not committing a crime. And
also, you need to have criminals to give them to criminals.
You do.
So I mean, and that even in the Channel 4 documentary, they described how people were really struggling to get their hands on them, and they weren't being sold in shops. You couldn't buy them online in that way. So I mean, there's a huge amount of money to be made in and we saw in the Ghost Hack, which was a much smaller network, and there was a guy operating that in Australia. Basically, he was described in court as a computer geek, and he was amassing millions a year solely from running that network of phones
from his bedroom in his parents' house.
The Kinahans had their own network, encrypted phone network.
Yeah, it is believed.
Well, it was. Yeah. The phones were described in court.
Yeah.
When they were communicating with Imre Arakas.
Yes.
And there was handles read out in court, but it wasn't the Encrochat network.
No.
So why are they, is somebody linked to the Kinahan organised crime group distributing Encrochat phones?
Well, I think he's distributing it for profit. I think it's a sideline where, as Eamon says, you make $1 million.
But it's also a network. It means that you can if you have an Encrochat phone, and you get a message from someone you don't know, it's somebody involved in organised crime, just like you. I mean, we saw that in the Channel 4
If you were
documentary.
being very paranoid, you might, for example, think that Encrochat, as we learned later, the FBI did actually set up their own network and distributed them themselves, essentially, to the criminal community. But if you were very, very paranoid in relation to Encrochat, you'd wonder why certain people weren't using them, and yet they were being distributed amongst some members of their own and other organisations. Just saying. Saying.
But you had this depiction as well in the
Channel 4.
Mind. In Channel 4, in the documentary. What was it called, actually? Operation Dark Phone.
Yes, Encrochat Operation Dark Phone, Murder by Text.
And they had, there was a list of somebody saying, I have all these guns for sale. And it was like a fearsome arsenal, like AK-47s and a Scorpion submachine gun and Uzis and Sweets, as they were calling them, which is the bullets. And they said they could see this being cut and pasted and being sent through all over the contacts within the criminal underworld in the UK, and they were actually horrified at the idea these weapons were going to start appearing. But it also gave them a chance then to figure out the various connections between different people. They were able to identify the distributor of the guns, and it helped them then, I suppose, kind of start putting names to some of the handles that they got.
And all the while this hack was live and they were getting the messages, as you say, before they were even encrypted, so this was led by essentially Europol. It was overseen by Europol. It was led by the Dutch and French. They were disseminating the messages and sending them on to the member countries who were identified as places where Encro phones were being used. So the NCA in the UK got the messages, the PSNI in the north, the Garda Síochána in Ireland got them, and then France and the other member, I think the Netherlands was another country that was involved, in Belgium, if I'm right.
Yeah.
Don't understand really why Spain wasn't, but anyway, that's maybe just another story. So the messages were coming in at the rate of knots because there was a huge amount of communication going on. And I thought the documentary does it really well, as the lines start coming in and they can see these conversations. In the beginning, and we're in lockdown, this is the beginning of the pandemic as well as everything else. They're being brought in, the officers from home, to work 24/7 because in the beginning, there's just messages flying everywhere. They've no idea where they're coming from. And then they slowly start making the connections, don't they? Through these photographs, sometimes through
geographical details. One of the key ones, there's
or taking selfies.
Yeah.
Which is,
but one of the key bits of that is somebody, he arranges for a grenade attack, but he puts in, this is your man's address. So all of a sudden then
Yeah.
They just have to piece it together.
Yeah.
And in that case that you mentioned, the grenade didn't go off, and they realised that there was now an undetonated hand grenade stuck under a garden bush in a house, so they had to react.
And this was what I was going to say. So they had to make decisions, and when they start getting a bit of a handle on it, after some time goes by, they work out who's sending the messages. Some of the information is going to be for longer form investigation. Some of it, they're going to wait until they kind of get the green light from Europe that everybody's going in together to make arrests. But they have to do things in the moment as well. Like a threat to kill is a serious...
Yes.
They're going to have to go out if there is a threat to kill somebody. They're going to have to go out and some way maneuver themselves into a position to stop that without blowing the lid on the fact that they're all listening in on the phones.
Yeah, so, I mean, they describe, I suppose, initially basically doing Control F, where you go and search through all the messages and look for things referring to guns and threats and kill and murder. And those are the ones that give priorities. If somebody's bringing in a shipment of cannabis, that's a lesser priority than if somebody is trying to set up a murder. And obviously when somebody is arrested, at that point, the police across Europe really might have to go to a judge and get an arrest warrant, but that's a secret, and they can go and arrest. Then that person is arrested. They don't have to say, we read your messages. Ultimately, they know at some point in the future when these cases come to court that that's probably going to have to be used. But at that initial stage, they're trying to stop people being killed. They're also trying not to let it become knowledge in the criminal underworld that they have access to the messages. So they're trying to strike that on that fine line where they manage to stop really serious crimes while allowing them to amass as much information as they possibly can.
And you can see the pressure on police, and they have to, of course, keep a small team on this because they can't have every officer knowing that this is happening. The less, the better. The less people in the know, the better. The pressure on them is quite stark, isn't it? Those working on it when they're talking about it and leaving their families at home and having to go in and work around the clock and not being able to tell their families either what they're doing.
No, and they're not getting the messages live. They're getting them...
in some cases there was like a 18 to up to 48 hours of a delay. So sometimes if there was a kind of an imminent thank you. Threat that they weren't going to be able to, they're going to be too late. So in a way, it kind of, I suppose, it helped them in one sense. They didn't have to make that hard choice of do we let something go ahead, because they didn't. I mean, when it came to it, if there was a threat to life, they had to react to that, and they had to set up extra teams of threat to life teams, who were going to carry out the kind of protective measures.
Now, we always heard that how the Encrochat hack came to an end was a decision was kind of made, but that everybody, the police forces concerned, the Netherlands, of course, where they discovered that a grouping there was making its own torture chamber. I mean, those pictures haunt me of the dentist's chair and the container that's buried deep in the forest. And this total psycho is looking to bring in his enemies and have them all locked up in this underworld prison and tortured in this dentist chair. And anyway, so they were kind of, keeping that under surveillance and trying to locate where it was, etc. But we were sort of told at the time that a date was decided when to move, and that the UK, the NCA moved, the PSNI moved in on any sort of particularly sensitive investigations that they had to, the Netherlands, the Belgians, and they all held a big press conference and explained what had happened. And of course they said that date had to be brought forward because Encrochat, the company, discovered that they had a problem and sent a message out to all its users saying, dump your handsets. Now, the big takeaway in this Channel 4 documentary, and you guys haven't got to it yet, so I'll just tell you without totally spoiling it, but is actually what blew the lid on the whole thing was this corrupt police officer working in the UK. And she was a young girl and she had dodgy friends, and she seemed to have had a healthy cocaine habit. And she was passing on information to this serious criminal. And she managed to be promoted to be one of these sort of elite team that was working on the messages. And she didn't really know the enormity of it, but she was able to see the messages coming through. And she told her contact, by the way, they can see your Encro messages. He started sending round to his mates, listen, this thing isn't safe. And eventually, that's what blew it.
Yeah.
And her name is, actually, because she has since faced charges in relation to this, Natalie Mottram. But you should watch on because it's absolutely fascinating. And I don't think she had any idea how big a project this was. I mean, this is described on the documentary as, you know, the biggest sort of coup in the fight against organised crime ever.
Yeah.
And all the while she bangs on, we did nothing.
Yeah. So we did nothing. And I suppose you could see with Jamie Rothwell, who's he's a gangster from the northwest of England, is it? And
so he's Manchester.
Manchester, yeah. They're not just collecting information on his activities. They're not just stopping, he's planning shootings, they're not just stopping that, but they're using those information to bring criminal convictions. Now, obviously the guards, at the time of the Encrochat, they made very limited public utterances on it, really. But one of the things that was said was that, you know, it was said maybe in briefings off the record to other outlets or whatever that that they were going to keep this information for intelligence purposes, and that that Ireland's legal system wouldn't be able to sustain. Or there'd be we'd struggle to get convictions given how the messages were intercepted. And this is something, of course, that was said in England as well, in other jurisdictions.
We got a lot of argument with that, with Bomber Kavanagh's case, when we were listening to, when we were at the I suppose the virtual trial. And again, there was a lot of that kind of pre-trial stuff about whether or not they were going to be able to get the Encrochat expert in because this, of course, was because he was that busy
in relation to the gun plot. Kavanagh's already in jail serving a lengthy sentence by the time this case comes before the court, but the details of it relate to the lengthy sentence he got for drug dealing, and he's in custody, he's facing trial, and he comes up with this idea that if he gives over a stash of guns to the NCA, to the police who are dealing with him, they will deal with him more leniently in court, and perhaps they might not, he won't get such a lengthy sentence. So he's waiting behind bars. He gets this idea actually from his mate, Bobby Gerrard, who is an uncle of the footballer Stephen Gerrard, who's in prison with him. He relays this story about how this was done before. So Kavanagh gets on his phone and he starts ringing. Patrick Keating was dragged into that. His own son was dragged into it. Jack Kavanagh. Liam Byrne, his brother-in-law, is dragged into it. He's demanding that they source weapons. And he wants to gather these weapons, bury them in a field in Newry, and then lead police to them. But of course, the whole thing is caught on Encrochat. And that's where we have...
a lot of whinging and moaning about the pressure everyone was feeling.
Yeah.
Getting amateurs to carry out the work of hardened criminals and all the rest of it. It was kind of
there was an extraordinary bit actually during the trial when, or it must have been maybe the pre-trial hearings, I can't remember, but they're describing how Kavanagh is so antsy because Patrick Keating will not talk to him on the phone from he's in prison, and Patrick Keating quite rightly imagines that, they could be listening in on this, even though it's
calling me on an ordinary phone.
Calling me on a phone, and in one case on an ordinary phone, but also that, there's bugs or whatever, and Keating won't talk guns with him.
Yeah.
And so then he rings his son, Jack, and gets him to call round to Patrick Keating. Keating opens the door and Jack hands him the phone, and there's Bomber on the other end.
Yeah.
What a pest.
Yeah. Yeah, but he's careful. I mean, he obviously, Bomber Kavanagh doesn't have one of these phones.
Yeah.
Everybody around him has him, and that is one of the reasons he thinks he's going to be safe ultimately. So even that, but that level of caution still didn't save him. So I think what the guards thought as this Encrochat, or the DPP thought, or the Department of Justice we don't know how this decision was made, or who made it, I suppose. But there was a belief, certainly at the time, that these Encrochat messages were intercepted and it wouldn't stand up in an Irish court. And there's a few reasons, legal reasons, I suppose. One of them is that, these Encrochat messages are intercepted on a French server, so they have to prove it was in Ireland. There's also issues to do with privacy. There's also legal issues to do with how, there's laws in place to allow guards to bug conversations, really. But those don't really relate to something like Encrochat. So in England, what it was, you're allowed to basically intercept phone calls, but this was regarded as being sort of slightly different. So there was all these legal complications, and also because the French authorities, as you said, they haven't really said how they hacked into the network fully, officially. So in theory, somebody could challenge that, and there was all this belief.
But in theory, in everything there's legal challenges. That's what lawyers are employed to do, and why they often get paid very healthily for it with their big brains, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you look at the state taking the case in the Regency against Hutch, and knowing that a lot of the conversation that they had picked up on the 10 hours of bugging Jonathan Dowdall's car was recorded in the North.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the state must have realised that the defence was going to challenge the legality of that being used.
Yes.
It was a key part of the evidence, and the defence did indeed challenge the legality of it. And the judges decided that basically the greater good was that it was illegal, but it can be let in anyway because
they're investigating such a serious crime as murder. So it wouldn't be allowed let in if it was something very minor.
Yeah.
But I suppose the greater good is served in a legal sense. So there was a lot, but there, because
it just seems to me to be such over caution. You surely try it before you decide to not use this sort of intelligence at all. And I mean, going back again to the murder of Robbie Lawler. So it happens, I think it's the 4th of April. They're live on the phones. I'm glad to hear there was a delay sometimes in the messages coming forward, because you'd hate to think that anything like that was watched or live, or that there was any sort of live information coming in while somebody was about to be ambushed, like in that fashion. But if you look into the detail of that murder and what happened in the aftermath of it, it's fascinating, because Ger Dundon, Quincy Bramble and Levi Killeen are picked up, arrested, brought into custody that day to be questioned in relation to the murder of Robbie Lawler. They are with Lawler in advance of the murder, and Ger Dundon actually drops him to the house where he is murdered in Ardoyne and speeds away in the car after the gunman comes out the front door and kills Lawler. One of the bullets, I think, seems to have hit the back of his car. So clearly, as investigators, you'd imagine that you would keep an open mind in relation to the Dundons or any involvement they may have had in a conspiracy to murder somebody. Given their history, you look at the other Dundon brothers and how quick they are to use a double cross at times. It's part of the MO of the Dundon organisation to use a double cross. Yet, Ger Dundon, Levi Killeen and Quincy Bramble are released very quickly after their arrest. Levi Killeen unconditionally.
Yeah.
So what has happened between them being arrested as suspects in a murder and them being released, Killeen unconditionally? In other words, never wanted again.
Yeah.
They're allowed out and travel south.
Yeah.
And a couple of days later, members of the Dundon, associates of the Dundon gang, 2 women, are apprehended while they pick up a €50,000 cash bounty, apparently, from members of the Maguire organisation, who are, arch enemies of Robbie Lawler.
Yeah.
So they pick up the money, but they're released unconditionally. We can imagine they have had absolutely nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
They have opportunistically picked up,
The reward,
a reward that's out there for anybody who can kill him. So what has happened within those few hours? It has to be Encrochat material.
Well, it would make sense, wouldn't it, that the PSNI have, because of the time frame of when it happened, that they have this information and they're able to say, well, look, that's not the people we're looking for. I mean, they haven't had to say that, of course, in a court case because it hasn't come to court. Why they have, if Encrochat messages will be...
Well, there's cases before the court, how delayed things are in the north, and they will eventually have to, give... They have pretty much said during bail hearings, the PSNI, that they know exactly who did what.
Yes.
And they would have had the luxury of, given the date of the murder, the 4th of April, given the length of the hack, which was for 72 days, whatever it was, they would have had the luxury of being able to watch the conversations or certainly later piece them together.
Certainly.
In the aftermath.
Yeah, definitely.
So, conversations, whatever people said to one another, it's done, he's dead, whatever, I don't know, get rid of the getaway cars, whatever.
Yeah.
All of that, they will have had access to. That's a long time ago, without anybody being lifted in relation to it.
Down here. So definitely it is. And so the reason, as I said, was all of this was, decisions like what to do with the Encrochat data, right? Or the Encrochat messages. Like, who makes those decisions, and, what oversight is that subjected to? We'll never know, do we?
Well, I mean, we surely have to imagine that the decision was made by the Garda Commissioner, Drew Harris.
Or people, certainly,
But he's in charge of the guards.
Yes.
The information is coming in.
Yeah.
And unlike in the UK, when the information comes in, it's sent on from a centralised unit to the areas, because the UK is obviously bigger than here, to the various districts, Liverpool, Manchester, wherever it's relevant.
Yeah.
And, people are, a small amount of investigators trusted or informed that this is going to be what's happening here. You've got to be ready for, to move on certain things or not. What we understand is what happened here. Somebody who has to be the Garda Commissioner, I mean, if he's the Garda Commissioner, he's the guy making the decisions.
Yeah.
Makes the decision that the information is kept within crime and security
and
intelligence.
Describe what crime and security and intelligence are for people who don't know.
Well, it's the sort of spooky unit, isn't it? It's kind of like the little sort of place where doors are closed, where people have information from bugged phones, from bugs that are placed around.
Just to describe it in more detail, like, it's a unit that was set up
in less cartoon style.
So it was, I suppose, it's a separate unit. The way the guards are structured, there's obviously regional bodies.
It's like our MI5.
Yeah, so it's like our Secret Service, I suppose.
They would have been known as the special branch, say.
The special branch back in the day.
Would have been, the kind of the political police in a sense. So their thing would be about threat to the state.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly about Republicans.
Like internal threat to the state, whereas the army then it's their job for external threats to the state.
So they really, that's their origin, was policing the IRA, wasn't it? Like, I mean, for the most part.
And that really has moved into the organised crime groups being seen as the terrorists nowadays. And obviously there's, other political movements, etc. But less and less so.
So
dissidents nowadays.
So if the crime and security maybe have a bug on somebody.
Yeah.
Did they get asked by say the Garda unit, can you look at somebody, and they then carry it out? Is that the way it works?
I actually don't know how it works. I know it's very, very secretive.
Yeah.
It's really quite weird little place. And, they're operating and answering directly to the Garda Commissioner and a handful of people around the Commissioner who are aware of this top secret information. But from what we have been told, really, that is where the Encrochat material stopped.
Yeah.
When we see a surveillance operation being put on members of the Dundon, the two women that go to collect the money, it is the National Surveillance Unit who are involved in that.
Yeah.
And they have clearly been given instructions that there is intelligence that this transaction is going to happen and where it is likely to happen. So they put their members on it.
Yeah.
But I don't believe for a second that they were told anything about a hack.
No.
They're probably used to getting pieces of information to react to or to put under surveillance without being told where the information is coming from. Be like,
Yeah. And we had a great example of that, of course, during the Regency trial. So because everything comes out in a trial and, everything gets cross-examined by a defence, we heard about how the guns used in the Regency were seized. There was an operation in the aftermath of the Regency involving the Special Detective Unit and some of the intelligence services where they staked out and intercepted the guns as they were being handed over to a known dissident figure. Now, even though the Regency was under investigation, presumably by Colin Fox, who tragically passed, and that whole Ballymun Garda unit, they didn't seem to be aware of this other operation that was also targeting the people involved in the Regency.
In the moving of the guns. And ultimately, while they did come to know that Jerry Hutch and Jonathan Dowdall had been recorded by bugs, they weren't being informed on a day-to-day basis of all of this stuff. They weren't aware that Shane Rowan was collecting the guns to drive up north with them.
Yes,
Kalashnikovs. He's arrested. In an operation which I think involved the SDU, which is the Special Detective Unit, which still exists. And the National Surveillance Unit. So they're doing that. So you have detectives out in Ballymun investigating a murder. And you have the weapons of murder being moved, but they're not told.
No, and
it looks really bad, I thought.
Yeah, because obviously the guards know where these murder weapons are.
Yeah.
But the guards investigating the murder don't know that the guards know where the murder weapons are.
Nothing to do with it.
So that's
very frustrating if you were investigating the murder or expected to on any level of decency and not be told.
Now, you could argue that there has to be careful management of intelligence, even within the Gardaí, and that,
You don't even need to argue that. I mean, I think people totally understand that there has to be careful handling of intelligence and where it's coming from. I mean, we have to do the same ourselves when we get information from somebody whose life could be in danger if it was ever got out where that they had passed on information, whose jobs could be at risk, etc. Whistleblowers all the time will come and give us information which we then check out. But to make a decision to not disseminate the information down, and we noticed from our investigation into the Sinaloa, the Kerry-Sinaloa links, from what I can see in those Encro documents we have, there was cocaine flooding into this country.
Well, 100%.
And it wasn't stopped.
Yeah, well, we don't know that it wasn't ultimately stopped, but we do know that
the handles mightn't have been, identified at that point.
They mightn't have been identified.
But if you're saying you could have searched for drugs, and I mean, there has to be some, surely, communication, because it's on it, the Encrochat, where the trucks are coming in. We can see the date and everything that the cocaine is coming into the country. So there's all this, you see, which I just find it extraordinary. And there's never been even any politician who's taken this up who asked the question, am I just the only person in the dark here? Is there an answer to all this that is completely logical and makes complete sense, and I just don't know about it, why we handled it the way we did and why every other country involved handled it a different way? And to the extent the English jails are so full because of Encrochat and the continued success of this investigation that they have had to let people out, including our own Liam Byrne got out early. This is just from putting in a news search on Encrochat. So August the 1st, a drug dealer who thought he could hide behind an Encrochat device was caught out after he sent a picture of his own front driveway and street in messages seen by detectives. Rudy Caldwell, 37, from Woolton, this is Liverpool, was arrested at his home in April 2025 after officers discovered messages previously sent from his encrypted device and found plenty of evidence that identified him as playing a leading role in the supply of large quantities of cocaine, heroin and cannabis. He appeared at Liverpool Crown Court today, Friday the 1st of August, after pleading guilty to conspiring to supply Class A drugs and Class B drugs. This guy, they took 5 years to get to him because they have so much other work to do, but they still got to him. So they, NCA in the UK, and I think the last time we looked at, the success rate of Encrochat investigations, there was over 1,000 convictions.
Yes, and lots of guilty pleas.
Lots and lots of guilty pleas, but they're 5 years ahead of us. And we're dusting down the material now?
Yeah. Now, there have been successful challenges in some parts of Europe as well. I think there was a successful challenge in Germany, which...
The Germans hate surveillance stuff. They never allow any of that. They really have a thing against it.
They have much stronger privacy laws.
Really big time. I mean, I just know that from my work on the Penguin and the underground bunker and that darknet thing that was going on.
Yes, and some of the encrypted messages hacks in America has also struggled legally. So there may well be legal challenges in Ireland, but I suppose, and we've seen this again and again actually in this country, where a politician will stand up, totally unrelated to Encrochat, and say, "Oh well, we couldn't do that because the Attorney General told me we'd lose a case if it comes to it." And I always sometimes think, why don't you just try it anyway?
Try it.
Yeah. So but look,
as a state, we're seeing problems.
Yes,
and we're not seeing possibilities.
Yes,
or as a force.
Yeah,
as a Garda force, perhaps, or as the office of the DPP. They're not seeing possibilities, and this is not me saying that this was the most significant coup for police forces across Europe in the fight against organised crime. These are people who are working on it, who are in charge of these policing organisations that are saying this.
Yeah, so look, what we do know, right? The Mr. Big network are on Encrochat. The top level of the Burn Organised Crime Group were on Encrochat. We know that a top level gang in the Galway area were on Encrochat. We know that people that were linked to the Mr. Big network operating in the border area were on Encrochat. So we know all of those people are on Encrochat. I mean, that's what we know from
members of Limerick drug gangs as well. We know we're on Encrochat
doing their business quite openly, like everybody else.
And you know them from the UK court cases. So that's...
It must be a worry if you've been an active gangster since... 2020.
Imagine trying to remember
this is quite possibly coming down the line at some point.
Imagine trying to remember what you texted back then in April and May of 2020. You wouldn't have a clue.
No.
Well, if you were up to something, you would suspect that maybe you had been texting around what it was you were doing.
But those are the ones we know, and we only know them because the people that they've come before the courts in the UK because they're operating literally on a transnational basis. There must be loads of mid to high-level guys who are operating in this country who only ever sent messages within this country.
So do the words of Seamus Boland send a chill out into gangland this week? Or is it something that there's a lot of people out there hoping to God they got away with things and that they'll never come knocking because of decisions that were made? Or does that statement he's made send a little bit of a chiller?
Well, it must do. It must do because they must realise that that they're not getting a get out of jail free card. And if people have pled guilty to various crimes, for example, I mean, Patrick Keating and Liam Byrne and Jack Kavanagh, the son of Thomas Bomber Kavanagh, all of those people have admitted to the crimes they were charged with, where their Encrochat handles were detailed. So, in part, that bit of the case is already proven.
Yeah.
So the other people they were in contact with, Liam Byrne is in contact with somebody in Dublin, it's not going to be... It's going to make it easier, isn't it? Because they can say, well, we believe this is Liam Byrne. The reason we believe it's Liam Byrne is because...
He admitted it.
He
admitted that was his handle.
Yeah, so that is kind of half proven. And you saw that in that documentary where they have to prove who's talking to who.
Yeah.
But some of who's on one end of the line has already been nailed down.
So are you going to watch the end of it?
I'll watch the end of it now. You're sort of publicly shaming us for not watching the whole thing.
Yeah, well, you
could have delayed our
told
podcast.
Us how it ended, though, as well, didn't you? You told us how it ended.
No, that's not how it ended. It's just I was really interested in that sort of takeaway because it just shows you, how these things are brilliant while they're still going, but it just takes one loose talker.
But don't forget, like Jamie Rothwell, who features in the first episode, he was only sentenced last week as well.
Yeah.
And he got his 43
He did his little dance. Did you see that as well? They put out the video of him doing his little dance after he was caught. But
they obviously threw the book at him, in terms of his
but it was. I think what was amazing was, though, you do see how Encrochat allowed these guys to live abroad and can totally run their business with and without having the encrypted device.
They're still at that. There's more encrypted devices.
It was, but it would be so much more complicated without that digital technology. You really would have to be in. You'd have to stay in the country you're in to operate it.
But it's a little bit like whack-a-mole, isn't it? Because they close down one or they hack one and they just set up another one. Because, of course, the next one, they all went from Encrochat to Sky EEC, which is later hacked and is, with even more success, actually. Largely that was used in Belgium and the Netherlands, in those countries.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the FBI did their own one where they created the devices and sold it into the criminal underworld.
Yeah.
So God knows what they're using now, but I imagine that they're still on the phones.
Say so.
But listen, it is a good watch. It's really good, and it probably explains Encrochat in a far more controlled fashion than I ever could.
Yeah. They don't bang on anyway.
Yeah, they don't bang on. All right. I'm Nicola Tallant, and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.